Buenas tardes, surfistas. It's great to have you with us today. I'm your host, Valeria Vega. Today, we're talking about the economy, not just the big picture stuff like GDPs, inflation rates, and the Dow Jones, but how all of it comes together to affect the lives of everyday Salvadoreños. We talk about the viejitos left behind by government austerity measures and how that remesita that your nana sends to her sister back home each month helps keep her and everyone else in El Salvador afloat. Kendra, our intrepid economist in today's episode, is really smart and cool and accessible. I am not a numbers guy, and even so, I learned a lot from our conversation. I am positive that you will too. Kendra was so good at explaining things, in fact, that you'll hear very few asides from me in this episode, as she does most of the talking. Let's hold hands while we stress about what's financing these beautiful new constructions in the greatest little paisito in the world, and find out what's really going on in El Salvador's wretched-ass economy. Choppy waves out there, gentes, but here we are still, live from Surf City. Good afternoon, surfers. It's another beautiful day in Surf City, and I am here live with no, I can't say that. I actually have way too many feminist economist friends, but one of my favorite feminist economists. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to talk to you about Surf City and the economy and how great it is.
Yay! We get to know about how high the economy is, and as high as the waves in Surf City. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you know so much about the Salvadoran economy?
Well, I'm a feminist economist because I have a specific approach to the economy. I'm born and raised in El Salvador, so that's why I know a lot about it. And the reason why I study economy was because when I was very young, like a teenager, I was very concerned about inequalities, which was kind of nerd of me. Yeah, since I was very young, I was curious about what was happening and why people have so much money and other people have so little. So here I am, trying to respond those questions still.
Which we still don't know the answer to.
Yeah, we don't know exactly.
Before we move on to the actual nitty-gritty of the conversation, can you explain what it means to be a feminist economist? Like, how does that make any sense relative to the economy?
The reason why we want the economy to be better, or how we measure the economy to be better, it's based on how all people and how we are able to survive. So we focus on life and not specifically on financial things like the GDP or investment or imports, exports, and things like that. We understand it. We know we have to track them, but it's not our objective. Our objective is to try to have a better life for all people and our living things in the society. And also that we want to make sure that society starts to value caring for people, caring for the environment, and that it's like a specific approach. We want the government and the society to understand that without women mostly taking care of other people, economy will not work at all.
Okay, so let's just assume, like everyone else does, that we actually don't care about life for a minute and we only care about things like the GDP and imports, exports. How is the Salvadoran economy doing right now, and what is it currently based on?
It's really bad, and the only thing that it will make you feel relief is that it always have been this bad.
That's comforting.
Yeah, so it's not news. We have what we know as structural problems, which is that most people have very low income. They don't have a steady job. They work at the informal sector, so that means that they don't have social protection and security on their income. And that has been that way in the last 50, 40 decades. So it's the same things that are happening right now. So if we talk about the GDP, the average growth on the GDP, it's 2.5 per year. And it has been the same in the last 5 years, taking off 2020, it was COVID, and 2021. But the rest is the same. And if we talk about investment, foreign investment, from every $100 that came into Central America, only 5 came to El Salvador.
Where does all of the rest of it go?
Costa Rica, Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Yeah, Nicaragua.
Wow. Okay. I thought that they were doing a lot worse than we were.
Yeah, democracy is not that important.
I mean, that's what I'm gathering from what you just said. Sort of democracy, dictatorship, it doesn't matter. We've overwhelmingly had a population that is in the informal sector without a regular paycheck.
Yes. The only difference, for example, in foreign investment is that the changes that we have been seeing on violence, specific gang violence, we thought, or someone thought, that it will bring more attention and more investment into El Salvador. And it has not been that way. Actually, we have been worse than ever, and we have negative investment.
What does that mean? Are they taking our money?
They are taking the money. So yeah, sectors that were already here in El Salvador, like sweatshops, they live on 2022 and 2023, because the only reason what they were doing business here in El Salvador is because we take off all taxes from them, and because they are able to pay $350 on salary. But in that specific terms, there's other countries who can also take off all taxes and you can pay less than $350. So yeah, they are leaving. So the foreign investment is not only $5, it's actually sometimes negative $3 or something like that.
Wow. Okay, so if that's not what's sustaining the Salvadoran economy, what is? I think people traditionally think of this as a coffee exporting country, but we know that's not been the sustainer of the GDP for a long time.
It's complicated, and I will say it like in a very cold way. Actually, what we produce, it's migrants. And that's the base, and that's the motor of the economy. And why is that? Well, first of all, we need remittance in order to survive every month. There's not only 1 month into the Salvadorian economy that we don't need remittance for living. And remittance represent 25% of the GDP.
That's very significant.
It's very significant. For example, if you measure the GDP based on sectors, private sector, the companies are putting into the economy around $16 from every 100. The government is putting 22 from every 100. So when I'm saying that the remittance represent 25%, is that they represent a lot more than what the government is putting, and almost double what the companies or the private sector are putting into the economy. They're adding into the economy. So it's very important. And it's not only important that remittance are being sent to the El Salvador, it's that they keep growing. Because every time we saw that remittance are not growing, we also saw a hit on our GDP and other statistics. So for that, you need people that's already there to send money, but you need, and when I'm saying need, I'm saying just in financial terms, you need people to keep migrating to United States and sending money to El Salvador.
So as someone who's not an economist, which I'm very much not, how is that calculated into the GDP? Like, are remittances literally paying people's salaries? Are they literally paying for the, I don't know, infrastructure and like constructions projects? Like, how does that get incorporated into the Salvadoran economy?
Well, actually, GDP, when we calculate GDP, it doesn't measure remittance. There's another type of measurements for that, but it represents 25% of our GDP. But in order to explain how Remittance are making the economy of Salvadorians work. We know from surveys and statistics that from every 4 homes, one it's receiving remittance. And they are receiving around $200 per month. And when you saw the average income of a household in El Salvador, it's $350 for every person. That means that around 50% of remittance represent around 50%
of a household income.
Yeah. And when we analyze more detailed information about remittance, we saw that most of 99% of remittance are being used for groceries, for food, for health. So it's actually not for investment. It's actually helping people to survive. And other statistic is that around 50% of households that are remittance recipients also are living poverty.
That makes a lot of sense. On that topic, can you speak a little bit about the cost of living now versus, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 10 years ago? Besides remittances, how are people adjusting to inflation?
In El Salvador, it's very complicated because we are not able to do something about inflation. Like in United States, I know that people that listen to this knows that the Fed are doing things, making interest higher in order to control inflation or things like that. We cannot do that.
Legally, or why can't we do that?
Because we don't print money. Yeah, and that's a very important point. We are a dollarized country. So because we cannot print money, the only way we can get money is if dollars are being sent to El Salvador. The only the major three flows of dollars to Salvadorian economy is remittance, loans, or investment. But we talk that investment it's not
the most reliable thing right now.
Yeah. And loans, we will talk about it, but they are expensive also. So that's why the only way we can get dollars is by the remittance flow that we have every day, every month, every year. So there's another thing, and that's that the exports and imports, all the situation, all the commercial relationship that we have is very intricate with United States. So around 40% of what we sell and what we buy from the world comes or goes to United States.
So even if it's made in China well, I guess maybe China's a bad example, but made in Bangladesh, it goes to the US first.
No, that means that what we buy, most things, 40% of what we buy, it's being produced in United States. So that means that if in United States the prices are
high, it's going to be high here.
It's going to be high here. There's no other thing we can do about it. And on the last 3 years, we have a higher inflation that we have in the last 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years. And actually, what most people is doing is just not eating what they used to eat. How much it costs? If you have two people living in a household with two incomes, around $500, $600 average income on the households. The statistics say that they need around $850 to cover everything they need to survive, and around $400 to cover everything what they need to eat, right? So I think people is just prioritizing surviving, but they are not eating in the best way, and there's a lot of reports on people not eating chicken anymore, or not eating meat, not eating milk, things that are more expensive.
How is the government treating inflation? That was such an ominous laugh.
It's because it's very funny for me to have gringos understanding right now at this moment how it is when you have a government that has no idea how the economy works, right? So our government was the first one of not having any clue on how the economy works. I just remember that one of the ministers said that inflation was something that was on your mind, that was psychological. So because, yeah, he said that.
Like it's all in your head.
Yeah, it's in your head.
The guy who said this was then the Minister of Finance. His name is Alejandro Zelaya, and he came in with only a dream and a few diplomas in accounting, business management, and international relations, not an economics degree in sight. Zelaya is now the El Salvador representative at the Central American Economic Integration Bank, one of the few entities in the region that's still down to let Nuevas Ideas borrow money in spite of El Salvador's bad credit score.
And he put an example of the guy that is selling bread on the corner of your neighbor. He didn't understand what it's inflation. He just listened that something is happening in Russia, and he's just, okay, I will say my bread higher today because of Russia, which makes absolutely no sense. The only reason why Juan, that is selling bread on your corner of your neighborhood, it's actually putting higher prices is because the cost is higher.
Yeah, flour is more expensive.
Yeah, that's it. So they treat it in the way they understand it. So they try to punish people who were making prices higher.
Can you think of any examples?
Yes. Going to gas stations and making sure they are putting the right amount of gas and on the right price, or going to supermarkets and making sure they are putting the correct price on it. But that didn't work because they were putting the price after cost. So it didn't work on 2023. And it actually, inflation was like 16, sometimes 8 to 16% on food. That was who was hit the most. Right now it's already low. It's around 1%, but it's because United States was able to manage last year inflation.
How are we going to do with the tariffs?
I think that even before we know that we will have 10% tariffs, which it was, I think, like 3 days ago, we are part of an agreement with Mexico, Canada, Guatemala, and Honduras, and United States. So, for me, it's very strange because United States has been saying to Latin America in the last 60 years, this is the way of your economy needs to work. You need to prioritize free market and free trade. So everything on our economies work based on that logic. And what they are saying right now is, you know what? Forget about it. Forget what I say in the last 50 years. I don't want that anymore.
So what are we moving to?
Chaos.
All right.
Yeah, there's no way that I can exactly tell you how we are going to be able to manage that, how anyone on the world is going to be able to manage that. Everything what we know until now about the economy is just changing completely, at least in narrative terms, because I'm not sure how United States will implement those measurements. And based on, I'm an expert on how crazy government works.
That's such a dubious title. I'm curious how you earned that.
I have been following, like, in the last 7 years, a crazy government. And what they say and what they do, it's very different. So I don't know how they are going to be able to do that without destroying the United States economy, for example, or destroying our economy. But the thing is, what we sell to United States, we sell things for migrants mostly.
Like, really? Like that?
Cheese. Yeah.
That's like our big export is like nostalgia products?
Yeah.
No way.
And what we buy from them, it's a lot of things. So, for example, when Trump said, we are putting these tariffs because we want to be reciprocate. Like El Salvador has been, just an example, selling to United States $10 and buying 45, right? So the free trade agreements have never been useful for small countries. The thing is that why I'm not like happy about what is happening right now, it's because it's not happening for the right reason. It's not that United States is saying, well, you know what, these free trade agreements were not actually in equal terms because we are so unequal. He's just saying like, I can get a lot more money than I was before.
Does this basically invalidate CAFTA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything, like the World Trade Organization, everything what we know until now.
CAFTA, by the way, is the Central American version of NAFTA, which might ring a bell. They're both free trade agreements in North America that eliminate tariffs between countries in the global north and the global south. Though agribusiness in the U.S. loves to complain about how they're getting the short end of the stick, the production capacity of the U.S. and Canada really leave everyone else behind. As a result, most of El Salvador's goods and services are now imported from the USA. So basically, we're not literally repealing, we're not like de jure repealing free trade agreements, but we're de facto repealing free trade agreements.
Yes.
All right. Good to know. Okay. So speaking of probably the immense increase in the cost of living that's coming this way, one of the big unresolved issues that you brought up in terms of the economy was poverty. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a bit about that as an economic factor?
Yes. I think that when you analyze any economy, if it has people who's unable to survive, your economy is just not working, right? That's my perspective. So you can have a GDP growing 5-15%, but if you still have people on your society who's not able to cover food, your economy is not working, right? And in that cases, and that's because of capitalism, basically, what the governments do, it's doing politics, right? Protection or programs who are able to make people survive that situation. In El Salvador, inequality and poverty, it's one of the main reasons of migrating, of wars, of marginalization and everything. Like the economy is the core problem. And the economy based on people work 50 hours per week and it's unable to cover food, which is a big problem for the economy. And in the last 20 years, we put an eye on poverty, and the governments, even from the right, try to make some programs to approach people living in poverty. They were not that important for the government, but even with that little support that they do, they were able to manage, and poverty was on the way down, right? But in 2020, because of COVID, poverty just had a raise on El Salvador, and it has been growing since that. And why is that? Is because the only programs that we have that were very little and not that important for the government right now are being defunded complete.
Like what?
For example, there was a program from money transfer for people who live in extreme poverty. That means that you have less than $1 per day. So we were able 15 years ago to make a map of the poverty in El Salvador, and we saw specific regions when households live with less than $1 per day.
When you say we, who are you talking about?
Economist. So they actually make programs for that. And one of the programs was like you give $30 every month or every 2 months to the woman of the household. And she has to make sure kids are going to school and to have medicines and checks with the doctor. And that, because they are giving you $30, it just puts you away from the extreme poverty, right? It's just $1 more, which is complicated, but it was a little help for those people. I have interviewed these women, and even though they are not going to go out of poverty, it was help for them. And they are totally defound in the last 2 years. So yeah, people who is suffering the most, like government right now, it's not putting efforts on people who is being hit the most with inflation, migration, violence. And
So you feel like those more like charity model programs really had an impact on poverty in the country?
yes, like a little, not that much. We want more integral approach on that. But I know that, for example, they were giving $50 to every person who is more than 70 years old.
Wow.
And has, yeah, and live in extreme poverty.
And that's gone.
Yeah, sometimes that's gone. Sometimes it's like they say, like in the last 6 months, no one has received their pension. That's a universal pension for people who live in extreme poverty. So I have interviewed those people, I have gone to those regions and saw how they, even those $50, which is not a lot, it can help you to buy a taxi to go to the doctor and buy some medicines, or help in your household, which is who is taking care of you because you don't have any pension or any social protection. So yeah, it changed people. And what we were pushing as progressive economists was to making those programs, giving more money to them and giving it to more people. And what is happening, it's the opposite.
So pivoting to the budget, if the government is not spending money on that kind of stuff, what is it spending its money on?
I was hoping for this question because right now we can talk about Bitcoin.
Oh, I'm so excited. This is what everybody in the U.S. wants to know about. It's like El Salvador is the home of Bitcoin and prisons.
I know you always wanted to have a podcast about Bitcoin.
That's why I'm coming to you live from Surf City.
Well, to be very honest, the budget of the government has always been very tight because we have just to put an example, for if you have any problem like COVID, like a pandemic, in the United States, you are able to print more money in order to spend more on whatever you wanted, right? But we're unable to do that. The only way we can spend more, it's asking for loans or putting more taxes. But who are we going to put more taxes on if most of people are surviving in El Salvador? So,
I mean, I can think of a few people, but it seems like they don't want to touch those people.
They don't know, yes. No, of course. We can always get higher taxes for people who's rich, but that's not happening. So what the last 30 years the government has been doing is just asking for loans. And we have a lot of debt. And just to put an example of how difficult it is, the financial situation of the government, the same amount that we use on budget 2025, the same amount of money that we use for health and education, it's the one that we use to pay interest and capital.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so health and education has the same allotment as paying back the loans.
Yes.
Wow.
And most of the paying back, it's interest.
So we're not even, I forget what the economical term is, but like the prime, is that the right? Yeah, we're not actually paying down the prime.
No, we're just paying interest rates. And what we are paying that because we have a vicious circle on El Salvador has a very bad financial situation, so it's very risky to give them money. So if you want money, we're going to give it to you, but with very high interest rates. Like this year, we issue at 12%.
That seems high.
Yeah, I think you have, or you are able to have loans lower than 12%. Mm-hmm. So that just gives you an idea.
I feel like that's like a predatory car loan.
Yeah. So it's another structural problem. But in the last 5 years, the government has been using money like there was no tomorrow. And they use money without any transparency. They use it to buy Bitcoin. They use it to push Bitcoin. They use it to making a normal beach surf city, which it was not a big change. But they use it for rebranding El Salvador. Even we buy Miss Universe. We paid $12 million in order to be, I don't know how to say it, so we can host Miss Universe on 2023, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, priorities were crazy. For example, in order to push Bitcoin into the economy, which, to give you an advance, it didn't work. Like, no one in El Salvador used Bitcoin. They used $250 million.
No way.
$250 million.
Isn't that like our entire GDP?
No. No, our GDP is a lot more.
Okay. El Salvador's GDP is currently 36.71 billion. That's a little okay, that's a little comforting, but that still seems like a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And for example, the amount of money that we need in order to make a universal pension for all people more than 70 years old, economists calculate that it will be around $250-300 million. That means that we could be given universal pension if we have another priorities that were not Bitcoin. And the thing is that not only was a bad priority, it was a awful investment. We gain nothing from that, more than rebranding and a lot of Europeans being curious about how it works. And they are here and they are buying one pupusa with Bitcoin, and that's it.
I've been tweeting about it.
Yeah. They are not even investing in El Salvador.
Okay, I do want to get back to the budget, but since we're talking about Bitcoin, what is the status currently? Because my understanding was this new, which we also hope to talk about, World Bank loan kind of put a stop to Bitcoin. So where is the Salvadoran government at with that?
I think that 4 months into Bitcoin law in El Salvador, we already knew that it was not working for anything at all for most people in El Salvador, but it was working for the government because they were using money without transparency. And it was working for some Bitcoiners who were very close to the government. They were buying houses, they were buying buildings. Bitcoin law allows you to buy things without paying any taxes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I think some people, like less than 100 people in El Salvador, not only Salvadorians, have benefits from Bitcoin. But most of people never. They try to push Bitcoin giving a $30 bonus, right, on Chivo wallet, which it was like, wallet you can download on your phone. And they put it on Monday, $30, and on Wednesday they were $28.50. And people were like, I will not put my money on that. So even...
Just because the price of Bitcoin had gone down?
Yes. It was too uncertain for people that has very little money, very little income. And even when, because it was not an ideological reaction. It was not that people was against Bitcoin. It was that El Salvador was used to like a laboratory of Bitcoin, and it didn't work as a currency because it didn't work as that. Right now, Bitcoin is being used as an investment. So that's why it changed prices. That's why you are able to buy at one price and then sell it to another price. But that's not something you want on your salary. And that's something that also happened because we thought that maybe people from United States who are very enthusiastic with Nayib Bukele, even Bitcoin, they will send remittance through that wallet. But they didn't do it. We have statistics that said that less than 0.5% of remittance are coming through that type.
Damn. Wow. Yeah. Did you ever use it? Have you ever used crypto to buy stuff here?
I tried to get my $30 because it was my money, you know. The government was using my money. And when I tried to enter, it was already used.
So someone had like stolen your data?
Yes. So that was one of the other reasons why people didn't trust Bitcoin or the wallet, because it was very insecure.
I'm getting off topic, but do you think that that was just like a random identity thief, or do you feel like that was like a sign of corruption?
I think it was a sign of how dumb you are as a government. Yeah, you're not able to do it right.
Chivo Wallet is a proprietary crypto wallet created by the Salvadoran government. It was developed using public funds, which were then channeled through private businesses, both domestic and international. And surprise, the local business interests are closely tied to Nuevas Ideas. In its first few months, the Chivo app crashed repeatedly, and thousands of people had their $30 in Bitcoin stolen, along with their identities, which were used to create fake accounts. You'll hear more about all of that in the episode with Noah from Cristosal. But suffice it to say, the chaos was enough to drive both users and the back end of the app insane and lose faith in the project entirely. The government of El Salvador is currently being sued in Texas by one of Chivo Wallet's original developers. And okay, so my understanding is that Bitcoin is no longer required to be legal tender, right? So what happened with that? Because there's a whole law where like allegedly everybody had to accept Bitcoin alongside the US dollar.
Yes, the Bitcoin law has a lot of things that were very complicated and have a lot of risk. Like, for example, they say that you have to accept Bitcoin in any type of payment. So that means that they can say your salary will be paid on Bitcoin, right? And that was one of our main concerns as economists. Yeah, it says it was legal currency. You can pay taxes with Bitcoin.
That's crazy.
It's the most ridiculous thing. But yeah, so you can pay taxes on Bitcoin. And another thing that was happening that was not in the law is that the president was always saying on Twitter or X that he's constantly buying Bitcoin. But we were never able to know where the money comes and how is that. Yeah, there was absolutely no transparency on how he's buying that Bitcoin.
Like, is he using government funds?
Yeah.
Is he using his...
He said he was using government funds. So what the IMF always goes to the countries who are in problems, in financial problems, and we are in big financial problems. So recently they make an agreement with the government, and one of the conditions was to making sure Bitcoin was not legal currency, that it was optional to take Bitcoin as payment, and that the government will not spend more public funds on buying Bitcoin.
Wow.
And that they have to make transparent all the business around Bitcoin.
I'm sure that's terrifying for them.
It is. And we're not sure if the IMF is really interested in knowing that information, or if they are just putting that on paper to making sure, like, I will give this money to this government, but I'm trying my best to make this government more transparent on that. But we as society and organized society, we don't know how to follow those conditions.
Does the IMF have anyone monitoring that kind of stuff? Like, is there somebody that's going to just jump out of the bushes and be like, it's been 3 years and you still haven't met like these metrics of transparency?
Yeah, I've been reading the agreement, and yeah, they say they will follow up every 3 months. The only thing is that they are not saying how we as Salvadorian society are going to be involved on checking these things. And the only objective that have real measurements is the cutting on the budgets. So they want to 3.5% of the GDP to be cut on deficit. That means that the difference between income and spending on the government needs to cut 3.5%, which is around $1 billion.
That's a lot. That sounds like a lot.
It's a lot.
I feel like we have 2 paths before us right now. Do you want to talk about the contents of the current national budget, or do you want to talk about the IMF loan and why it's important first.
I think we can do a mix on that.
Go for it.
So the budget on 2025, it was already including in the IMF agreement. So what we saw was a big cut on spending, mostly on salaries.
Like government employees.
When you saw the list of cutting on salaries, there was only 2 departments or 2 government institutions who were not touched, and it was the presidency and defense.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. The rest of them, they were all cutting salaries, which it means that they are also putting people, desemplearlos.
Mass layoffs.
Yeah. And we saw a lot of cuts on education, on health also, agriculture, programs that were direct to gender inequality, institutions that were made to approach gender inequality. So whatever was not a priority for the government, it was on the table to be cut on the budget of 2025 because of the agreement with the IMF. Because they need to make sure that
they're cutting spending.
Yeah, they're cutting spending. The thing is that the IMF agreement, it's not stopping on 2025 budget because the financial mess is so big, like very, very big, that you need to make sure at least on the next 5 or 10 years, you know what is going to happen with budgets in El Salvador. So they are asking, for example, one of the most important things they are asking, it's a pension reform.
IMF is.
Yes. A pension reform to make sure there's financial stability on the system. And another thing is that the government has been using pensions in order to survive.
That's where they're getting their liquid assets.
Yeah. And it's something that has been happening in the last 20 years also. But in the last 5 years, it has been happening a lot more. So they've been using, like, for example, between 2007 and 2019, government used around $400 million from pension funds to pay pensions. Okay,
so they pulled from the savings in order to actually pay people and thus depleting the savings in pension. Okay.
Because at some point we are very into free market, so we privatize our pensions, right? So we have 2 systems. We have a private system that has funds, and we have a public system that only have debt. So the only way that we can cover the public system, pensions for people, it's getting money from private funds. Yeah, such a mess. So they were using around 400 millions every year, and this government has been using more than $1 billion.
Holy shit.
Yes. So let's say we as economists, we were always concerned about the stability of this mess, but there's certainty that at this point and in the way they are using pensions, it will not be, it will not work in the next 2-3 years. It will be, we'll have no liquidity to respond to pensions, not only from the public system, but also the private system.
So speaking of liquidity, just how in debt is El Salvador?
Well, the IMF was also able to make sure the government was putting through on the debt because they tried to hide some debt.
What do you mean they tried to hide debt? What does that mean? That sounds so shady.
Yes, let's say 1 month in last year we have 80% of our GDP on debt, and then the next month was 54%.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
And we're like, what?
That's like not even slick. That's like really messy.
It makes no sense. Like, no one who understands how it works will say, oh my God, this government is the best. They put 30%
in 1 month.
No, they take all the pension on debt, they put it away of the statistics. So they put it back, and right now we are at 86% of our GDP on debt.
What does that mean? I don't know if I understand that, again, as a non-economist.
Well, I think that measurement is not that... It is important because it tells you that from every $100 that you produce this year, your debt, it's around 86% of that.
So 86 of those dollars is just going to pay back debt.
No.
Damn.
No, that means that if you wanted to pay it on 2025, you have to put 86% of your GDP in order to pay all your debt. But what you're saying, it's the most important statistic, and it's how much I have to pay every year on debt. And it's around from 25 to 30% of our budget.
Which you said earlier is the same as health and education combined.
Yes.
What does this current budget mean for everyday Salvadorans?
Well, the thing is that if the economy is not working because it has structural problems, so if you are an average Salvadorian, probably you don't have steady income, you work at the informal sector, you are managing to survive every day, every month. So let's say you get sick. Where do you go? Well, most likely you will go to the public system. Or let's say you want education for your children, you will probably go to the public system, right? Or even if you have middle income, your kids, the university where they're going, well, they will go to the national university, right? Because it's so expensive. And what it's happening is that all these services and rights that the government supply are being defunded. So now I wanted to put it in this feminist economist perspective, but all the caring that the government was doing about taking care of education, health, some aspects of agriculture, all the caring, it's just being defunded, most of caring. So it's not on the best quality that it was years ago. Someone needs to take care of that. And who is going to take care of that? It will be people who it's already having a lot of challenges surviving. So yeah, we saw a lot of very complicated situations, like women who, just to give you an idea, you're a woman who was selling tomatoes and vegetables at the downtown El Salvador, the centro. Your son or your husband, it's put on jail because of the regime of exception. Now you need to cover that income. Also, you need to make sure you have money for food for them, for the people who's in jail. Mm-hmm. And now you're not able to sell tomatoes and vegetables in that area because it needs to be clean for tourists. Like El Salvador needs to be not poor for the tourist, right? So they are not changing the situation of that woman. They are just making sure you're not seeing that woman anymore. They are doing that not only in narrative terms or in visual terms, that they are not able to walk on that streets anymore. They are also hiding statistics on that. So yeah, they are making more difficult for us as economists, as people who wants to take care of that problems. They are making very hard to talk about economical problems in El Salvador because it goes against their narrative that El Salvador is a very good country. It's the rebranding. We are going against the rebranding. So poverty, it's against the rebranding. Criticizing what the government is doing, it's against rebranding. To give you an idea, one statistic that it was Surf City, it's on La Libertad Costa. That's the name of that area, right? And that's one of the most areas who has more people in poverty in El Salvador. So yeah, that gives you an idea about what type of development they are bringing into these regions. So when you go there, yeah, you see more tourists. You see people probably buying things with Bitcoin. But Salvadorians there have not changed, like most Salvadorians there have not changed their situation, and they are living in poverty. They are closing schools around them, or they are asking them to leave their houses because they want bigger highway for tourists. So what is happening is that all the problems that we have in the last decades are still there, but we are like painting things in order to not talk about them anymore, which is for me a lot of like a big problem, because if you can't talk about problems, then you're not able to resolve them.
Can you say more about that? This might be my last question, but this is an important one. Being able to do your job as an economist obviously requires you to have access to reliable data. How is that working now under the current conditions?
It has been difficult. Like, just in the last year, we tried to do an investigation on women in sweatshops, and we are unable to get any statistics on salaries for them, which it was always a public statistic.
Where was that available?
It was on Social Security. It was every month they put it by sector. You can see their salaries, the average.
Because they want to know who's paying into Social Security,
Yes.
yeah, and where that money's coming from. Okay.
So you can saw the sector average salary per gender, only two genders, but gender. Yeah, we're not able to say anymore. So we're not able to track also how many people, like, it's on the informal sector or on the formal sector. We're not able to track that anymore. And on financial statistics, it's very difficult, because if I want to track the spending on the budget, I want to make sure I know where the money is going, and sometimes it's going to specific institutions that are not allowing to be as transparent. And we ask for that information, like how you spend these $2 billion on COVID. And they were like, no, it's on restriction in the next 7 years. I think they are giving that information to the IMF because they are asking for that information also.
Do you think the IMF is actually receiving it?
I think the IMF is receiving it. That gives you a lot of perspective of who's really in power here. Like, society has been asking for this information in the last 4 years.
Do you think they were even keeping track of it?
No.
Okay. I'm just thinking of the actual terror on these people's faces when the IMF is like, we need this information. And they're just like, that's in the past, baby. There's no way for us to know.
And they are making like the normal procedures for buying things from the government buying things and a lot of situations. So it's been very hard. And also that they know that you are your enemy, because you are trying to find out what they are doing wrong, right? And you're doing that because that's how it works. You need to make sure, like, the government, it's how things are doing, and when you saw something that's sketchy, you want to investigate more, or you want to be able to say this is not the way it should be. Like, for example, on inflation, you should be not going to the gas station and watching and making sure they are putting the right amount of gas. That's not the way. It's important for the government to make sure that people who's in more vulnerability has some food. So you make programs. If there's a lot of inflation on food, you make programs for specific and focused territories. When you go and say, this is the food you need, I need you to make sure that in these 3, 6, 9 months of inflation, you're not going to die or you're not going to get sick. So that was what we were asking the government to do, but it's it's going against the narrative that they are doing perfect. So it's complicated because now you're not an economist or a professional anymore. Now you are, of course, in a political side on it. You're always on a political side, even if you're doing technical things, right? But in these situations when democracy and the government, it's not as democratic, everything you do that goes with science, it puts you as a contradiction to the government, right?
Well, thank you from the opposición for being with us today and asking questions, even though people think that you're just stirring up trouble. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope that, El Salvador, it's a very good start if you want to know how a non-democratic government who's kind of lunatic works. So I recommend people who live in the United States
This has been your warning.
to read about what happened in El Salvador, because I think it will be very important for you to understand how the minds of these men work.
Thanks for sticking with us, surfers. Tune in next time to hear about political persecution and displacement from one of El Salvador's hottest exiles, the artist known as Atilio. Our theme music is thanks to the talents of Paco Casanova, George Fierro, and Guillo. Salud!